gang? We got people tuning in here. We've got some nice questions flowing in. Do you play palm down sometimes? Have you ever had to deal with drumming-related injuries? What's your favorite rudiment? I like. I've actually got a good one for you there. And how to improve your precision. Tips on double bass. What's up, everybody? Welcome to this Ask Me Anything. It's November 6th, 2022. And, there's a lot going on, but I'm stoked to just take some time to chill with everybody. Some people submitted questions before on Instagram, and some people emailed some responses. Some of my students from my website, jpbevimethod.com, submitted questions. So we got some stuff to work through today, and I'm going to try my best to be short-winded. Not my strength, but we're going to try our darndest. So let's start with actually a couple of these questions that just popped in right here. Favorite rudiment? You're not going to believe it. I've been drumming for 23 years. My favorite rudiment at the moment is the double stroke roll. Actually, this is going to tie into a question that we're going to talk about later. But long story short, I'm only discovering the potential of the double stroke roll combined with the paradiddle really now. And that's relevant to some jazz study. I've been doing some different vocabulary that I've been trying to build. But basically, my whole life I've been doing a whole bunch of sort of a separate approach, which we're also going to touch on today. But I've literally been trying to work on this type of vocabulary. Remembered, I got to get this going for the guys on YouTube. All right, if you're watching on Instagram, it's going to sound a lot better on YouTube because everything's going through the interface. But here we are. So I was saying, my favorite rudiment right now is the double because I'm finding that finally it's becoming relevant. I've always had kind of a love-hate, mostly a hate relationship with the double because it was like, yes, it's important on your way to other rudiments like the paradiddle and paradiddle diddle. Because you end up using doubles constantly. If you watch my left hand, right, you're always playing doubles. But I always felt doubles were just kind of in themselves, by themselves alone, not that useful. But at this exact moment, I'm trying to play stuff at a certain tempo, and that's very hands focused, right? So material that's like very right, not a lot of kick drum going on, so that if my hands need to take all of the control here and I want to play at that speed, doubles have to be the thing that fills the space. And funny enough, literally, again, 23 years into drumming, I'm literally doing doubles and paradiddles over here and just creating a system out of them that allows me to play melodies with them, right? So if I'm playing doubles, if I plug in a paradiddle, right, paradiddle, the doubles are already started. So you paradiddle, diddle, diddle, diddle. So every accent, I'm going right, single, single, right, left, or left, right, and that's triggering a paradiddle, but everything else is doubles. And then if you're mixing in a few just like eighth notes at that rate in there, couple little tricks like doing a few accent singles in a row. still working out the kinks, but the short answer is doubles are what I'm into the most right now, and paradiddles. And this actually, you know what, this launches us into two separate questions that were submitted prior that are highly, highly relevant. So the first one is literally, how do I get faster with my paradiddles? That was a question that was submitted. And I am actually very seriously this past week have been literally trying to get faster with my paradiddles. And I don't think ever in my life I have been trying to get faster with my paradiddles. But because I want to get this vocabulary that I just described faster, more versatile, more useful in more different situations, I need to be able to play these quarter note, right? Because I'm thinking about the melody that's going on here. When I'm going, I'm not thinking paradiddle, paradiddle, dabba, 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 paradiddle, paradiddle, paradiddle. I'm thinking da, ga da da, ba da da, ba da da, ba da da, da da da, ba da da, ba da da, ba. And I need all those patterns to just fill themselves in along the way, right? So the paving blocks along the path get kind of filled in. And I'm just thinking of the melody, which is why all of my teaching, improv-wise, is based around your ability to think of interesting melodies, your rhythmic vocabulary, I call it. But anyways, that aside, back thinking about doubles when, so because I want to be able to think of these quarter note melodies, let's say really simple things, da 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 ba, I need to be able to play those paradiddles as fast as I want to think of the melodies, da 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 da. So I've been pushing it. Look, long story short, here's a couple of things to think about when you're pushing your speed, especially with these paradiddles. You're probably going to have one hand that's stronger than the other. Pay attention to that hand. Spend some time at a medium tempo just observing what it does. What about the technique allows it to go quickly, right? And then you'll find when you look at your other hand, something is different, right? Maybe the like tilt of the stick is different. You're more palm down versus French grip kind of thing. Or you'll find this arm is moving up and down, and this one you're just using your wrist, something like that. So you're paying attention to your good wrist. For me, that's my right hand. You just play half a paradiddle diddle if you need, or half a paradiddle. And then trying to mirror that. Mirror that on the left side. Oh, I literally have a guy here off camera installing internet as we speak. We hoped it would get done by now, but there you go. Can you just step in the hall if you're going to chat for a while? You can come back in. Crack the door. Give it up for Spectrum, everyone. So imitating your good hand with your weak hand, obvious step one. The second thing here is strategically alternating between speeds, right? When you've got lower speed, say it's medium tempo for you, and then what you want to do is 2/3 of your time there, 1/3 up at like too fast actually, right? So a little bit too fast, right? Into just past your comfort zone. So you're going, really paying attention to the technique at a lower tempo. And then you're blasting past what's comfortable. And then you bring it back down. Right? You're alternating like that. And I would also say, practice these things in, and before I move on to the second idea here, what's happening when you do that is you're exposing your body to what it feels like to play it at a faster tempo. So you're in it, and you're saying, hey, body, I know we can't really do this, right? Sometimes you do this with like weightlifting too, when you do like the 1 rep. You know, you're like, okay, I can't do, 12 reps of this, or even 6 reps of this, but this is 1, and your body's like, holy shit, okay, I've been exposed to this. I'm getting ready. I'm preparing for the next time that I'm going to try and do that. So you're kind of doing that sort of incremental jumping back and forth as you go. And then the other thing is practice it in a context that you actually want to use it, right? This is big. I'm always emphasizing this with my students in general. But if you're doing like what I just described, like the musical context I hope to use paradiddles and doubles in, and it's all based around my ability to make melodies with the rudiments. So if I'm going to practice speed of paradiddles, why not also practice them in a context where I'm making the types of melodies that I ultimately want to play, so that I'm not creating myself then an additional step where I then need to translate my gains speed-wise into coordination on the drum set. Right, so you can kind of knock out two birds with one stone. Sometimes, sure, it makes sense to just like practice pad some technique, sure. But a lot of the times, you can sort of kill two birds with one stone, practice it in a way. So even if I'm doing this slow, maybe I'm just locking into a few melodies that I think sound good, that I want to play, that I want to be able to express myself with. Right, I'm doing this kind of down-up method. Down, 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 up, 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 down, 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 up, 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 down, 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 up. The down-up method is, again, from my website, jpvmethod.com. That's one of the melody-making tools that I teach students, and it sort of reappears everywhere. It's surprisingly useful all the way through your most advanced drumming. But in this case, same kind of thing. If you already know the down-up method, you can now employ it here and be like, okay, with my paradiddles, I already know the down-up method, so I'm going to follow it. But with these paradiddles, while I push my speed down, 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 up, down, 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 down. So that's all paradiddles and just literally all paradiddles, actually, and the little pause that switches it to the upbeat. So anyways, that's how I would work on speed. In this AMA, I actually, with some of the questions that people submitted, I actually took notes. I figured it would help me actually be less long-winded, if you can believe it. But the other question that ties into this is really interesting, and I've been thinking a lot lately about this, is when do rudiments become necessary for a new student? This is a surprisingly interesting question. And like I just described, I'm at this interesting moment in my drumming 23 years in, where I'm sort of like discovering the value of rudiments and like rudimentary exercises and rudimentary etudes and stuff sort of for the first time. And it's because of the genre that I'm studying, the type of music that I'm playing. And I have sort of a budding theory about this. And it is very much budding and a work in process. So if I contradict myself in a year, you'll have to forgive me. This is a thought in progress, but I think a lot of teachers are doing things a little bit backwards when it comes to rudiments, right? And when you think about rudiments, they're like just patterns that help your hands move. Well, two things. Rudiments help your hands be able to do the very necessary movements, the basic foundational movements that you need in order to do anything on the drum set. But rudiments can also be thought of as the actual building blocks, right? So you can, like I was just doing, take doubles and paradiddles and nothing else, paradiddle diddles maybe, add those in there, and play a lot of drumming using those explicit patterns. But then at the same time, if I do something like this, right, that was me flowing without ever referencing a specific rudiment. But I was using double stroke roll, like double strokes in there. So I had to, at some point, get my double strokes going. And I'm playing some different patterns. But this is where I think things are a little backwards. And here's the budding theory. And you have to forgive me if this seems super out of line. But a lot of older teachers today were taught by jazz guys of the generation before them. So you have sort of like grandparent age teachers, teaching style being taught by parent age for my generation people. Those teachers, grandparent age teachers 2 generations ago, that was a time when drumming education was super steeped in jazz because jazz was a lot closer to what was happening, right? And when I say jazz, obviously jazz is still happening. But I mean like the heyday of like the 50s and 60s of like, you know, Max Roach, Art Blakey, Alvin Jones, Philly Joe, the guys. And there was like a way of thinking about it, and it was so because of the way the drum set sounded and the way that things were recorded, it was hand heavy. You had to rely on your hand heavy stuff, which means you had to do what I'm doing right now in my own practice because it's hand heavy, because I'm studying jazz, which is where all these rudiments start to suddenly make sense. But a lot of contemporary music, it doesn't make as much sense, right? So if I want to be rock, a metal, a prog metal band, if I'm into whatever, Periphery and Animals as leaders, there's a lot of musical directions you can go in the contemporary scene that aren't that hand heavy and that don't have a bunch of space for like doubles and paradiddles and interesting like fast hand rudiments and flam drags and stuff, where you do have those in jazz. So I think a lot of students today are running into teachers who are like, okay, we're gonna like do a bunch of Wilcoxon solos, and they're like, why do I need to do this? I don't understand how it translates. I want to play gospel chops. I want to play linear drumming that doesn't have any of these rudiments in it, right? I want to do right, and when I'm playing it's not necessarily a direct, it's not like, oh, just orchestrate that and it'll be linear chops. Like, it's actually a totally different approach that's needed. So you have teachers kind of force feeding this like 2 generations, not old, it's still relevant, but like 2 generations ago mentality, when the students themselves are steeped in other types of music that they want to learn that doesn't necessarily connect to that and that doesn't excite them. So I had, sort of like I had never wrote off rudiments, but I'd sort of like been like, yeah, rudiments, like they helped me get my hands going. I see where they're useful. You can make paradiddle grooves. You can do paradiddle diddles and all sorts of fills. You can divide them between the hands and the feet. There's uses for them, but they're not actually necessarily the foundation of my teaching. They're not necessarily the foundation of, dare I say, even a lot of my playing. So I started teaching improv to students with a totally different approach that was based on, for example, first the ability to think of melodies, but then going right hand lead, right? So you're being able to make an unfolding melody with the right hand. Right? And you can do that without really taking too big a detour through your 26 American Standard rudiments. And you can, from that place, start improvising pretty quickly. You can start orchestrating, adding kick drums, adding left hands. Occasionally, like, a rudiment exists within that flow, but I'm not thinking in rudiments. I might need to make a detour to work out my doubles, but to make my hands just work better. Again, like I said, one of the purposes of rudiments is that they teach your hands how to just do the things it needs to do to execute anything on the drums, right? To hold your stick and play 2 notes at a time. Boom. But so I've been focusing more on that sort of totally different, almost rudiment-free approach. Like, very rarely with my students am I assigning them a bunch of rudiments to play, and my students can improvise really well and they can play plenty fast, right? And a lot of them, like, they had some phase where they just like did a lot of rudiments on a pad, and now their hands are like fast enough and good enough to do what they need to do. Again, well, let me complete that thought. Fast enough and good enough to do what they want to do, and then they develop this freedom at like a medium tempo, let's say. And when they want to push to another tier, like this person that probably asked about paradiddle speed, then they make an intentional and very purposeful detour into rudiment land. And they literally sit with a pad, and they do what I was just saying with the tempos, and they get their hands moving fast enough to execute the things that they really want to do. But they didn't build with rudiment building blocks, and that's not how they think when they're playing. And that's not how I think when I'm playing, and I assume that's not how most people think when they're playing. They're thinking in melodies, and you've had to do whatever rudiments here and there to make those melodies happen. Anyways, So, when do rudiments become necessary to a drummer? That's my long answer to your question. They're kind of always useful, but you don't have to. I don't want you to think that flowing and filling on the kit feels like thinking of rudiments. It doesn't. And you can learn to flow on the kit without really ever practicing your rudiments. But at a certain point, you'll probably need to strategically choose and practice certain rudiments in order to execute the ideas in your head. Okay, so much for not being long-winded. How we doing in the chat? I can only see the Instagram chat. I saw Sundub is in the house. I live under a rock, so they either just put out an album or they're about to put out an album, but that's Joanna Teeter's reggae band. Give them a follow. Sundub Music. They're changing the reggae game out there here in New York City. What do we got? Oh my gosh. Yo, JP. How important is it to focus on the things that you're good at? George. Good question. I'm going to give you a perhaps counterintuitive answer to that. Again, nothing's cut and dry. I'm almost always focusing on stuff that I'm pretty good at this point in my life. Again, the undercurrent that needs to drive all of these decisions is thought and intention behind what you're doing. So I'm really bad at double bass right now. I also don't care. I'm not going to practice it. Even if I could get called for a gig that wants me to play double bass tomorrow. I'm willing to take that risk and just dust it off quickly when that comes. Because the fact that I'm not good at it is a reflection of the fact that it's not a high priority for me. It's not of high musical value for me, so I'm not spending time on it. And if you're always working on weaknesses in general, you could get to that weird mentality, which I encounter with students sometimes, where they're just like, I'm like, what do you want to work on? And they're like, I feel like I really need to get my bossa nova together and like my Afro-Cuban grooves and in the spirit of rudiments, like do some snare etudes. And I'm like, that's what you want to work on? Just to be clear? And they're like, no, but I feel like I should. You should have, and I'm like, sure, if you want. But you're probably not going to get called for a samba gig. And if you're doing a band, if you're in a band that might do some samba covers, then it might make sense. But if you're in a rock band and you don't really foresee needing to play 6/8 Afro-Cuban groove, maybe we should prioritize something that you're actually excited about, that aligns with your musical vision. And that is going to, in turn, inspire you to spend a lot more time practicing and a lot more focused, intentional time practicing. So you want to focus at the things that you're not good at that are within the bubble of things you care about being good at. How's that? So there's stuff that you're not good at that you also don't need to be good at, don't need to care about. That's fine. But within your bubble, you should sort of always be working on what you're not as good at as you wish you were, right? So if I'm going to sit down and practice, I am going to always be really focused on something that I can't do as well as I want to do. And in that case, I guess it is sort of a weakness, but it's within the bubble of my musical strength. And by that, I mean my musical interest, stuff that I want to be able to play that is in line with my voice as a drummer. Yes, we're getting good at giving really complicated answers to simple questions. Let's see if we can keep it up. Oh, nice. This is a good question. Okay, let's tie these two questions together. From David, thoughts on how to get through days when you feel like you just suck? And then another question that was submitted beforehand, what helps you overcome imposter syndrome around great musicians? Great questions. I had a session in the studio yesterday with two people who I admire and respect enormously as musicians, and it's really easy to feel imposter syndrome. So here's some thoughts. They may help, they may not.
And this is one of the questions that I saw earlier that I was writing some thoughts about. For me right now, part of my spiritual quest is radical acceptance of who I am and my drumming. And especially since my drumming is my creative contribution to the world. It really is an extension of my person, an extension of my voice. And you don't have to see it that way, but I want to see it that way. But in order for me to see it that way, I need to divest my self-worth from it, right? I need to be able to show up, do my best, be as prepared as I need to be, and then accept that what happens is truly where I'm at. So yesterday was an interesting experiment. It was a session that I organized, but we wrote this music together to perform, and it's going to post on YouTube soon. It was with Christian Lee and Simone Wilson on piano and bass. And it's pretty adventurous stuff. And it is in my wheelhouse, but it's not publicly known to be in my wheelhouse. It's the type of music I really love to play the most, want to play more of. That's why we're doing this. But I'm not known for doing it. All that just to say, it was a beautiful, whether or not, I'll put it this way. I came home after the session yesterday, and to really open up deep to you, I was proud of how I handled the session emotionally. Whether or not I played things well or perfectly, and there is no perfect, it was heavily improvised music. I came home and I felt like, you know what? I was able to not get wrapped up in that. We would do 2 or 3 takes and we'd say, cool, none of them are perfect. Which one was the best? Now let's move on. We didn't even listen back. We didn't even listen to the sounds we got when the studio engineer set it up. We're just like, dude, let's dive in. I'm going to take this as an opportunity to push myself in my practice of radical acceptance. And sometimes Christian he was like, man, this take was a really killer piano solo. And I completely botched some drum stuff at the end. And there was a part of me, I paused and I went, let's post it. Hell yeah, dude. I'm down. So I'm really trying to, especially in this world where it's content, everything is content. You just have to turn the camera on and make stuff. If I am so wrapped up in needing to be at my best, show something brilliant every time I touch a drum set, it's debilitating and it's discouraging and it makes it not fun. And it makes it no longer feel like this is an extension of me as a person, right? Because when I turn on the camera, I can just talk to you and you're getting my thoughts, right? And I'll stumble on words and I'll lose my train of thought. All sorts of dumb things happen. I have to allow that to happen when the voice I'm using is my drums too. So radical acceptance, make it a part of your spiritual practice. Another idea, know when being precise matters. So there are some things where you can't do what I did yesterday. You can't go, none of those were very good. Let's pick the best one and move on. Anyways, and I'm going to post it on my YouTube to tens of thousands of viewers. Sometimes you really do have to be perfect. I mean, by perfect, I mean like execute a part precisely. But I think part of the art of this is knowing when that needs to happen. And when it does, being super crazy prepared and showing up and essentially just kind of doing what you've trained yourself to do. Yesterday, completely improvised music, basically. So I was like, I didn't have anything to practice, really. I was like playing the drums, leading up to it, a normal amount, and just kind of like, here we go. Let's show up and do some stuff. So know when being precise matters. Another one, know when the effort no longer justifies the gains, right? So again, yesterday, we were trying to knock out 5 tunes. And we do 3 takes. We could have done way more if we were trying to really nail the parts. But at a certain point, it's like, how much better is it getting? And how much less fun are we going to have with every repeated, increasingly anxiety-filled take that we're not nailing? So if I'm going to do an 8th take and it's going to get 2% better, that's not a trade-off worth doing. It's not even worth the 6 minutes that it's going to take to do another take, let alone the anxiety that you're going to pour into it. The nervousness, you're like, this is the last take. I really have to get it better this time. 2%, no one's going to notice 2%. You're not even going to remember 2%. So that leads me to my next point is, know when you've sort of maxed out your potential or when you're at least close. And that's when you come back to your radical acceptance and you say, this is where I'm at right now. I did my best. Cool. Good to know. Let's move on. And that's where you double down on being yourself and you be honest with yourself. So this is a weird sort of like, I don't know if honest is the right word. Maybe it's realistic. But when you are going for that 12th take and you're like, I just need to nail it. I know I can nail it. I just need to nail it. There's almost something weirdly deceptive about it. Let's say you nail it. Okay. 12th take. Nailed it. Put it out. That's what people think you are. That's like if I was giving you I was pretending that I'm just answering questions right now, but it's actually like a speech that I've written. And on the drums, it's different because it's a performance piece. You're allowed to try to get it perfect. But there is something refreshingly honest feeling about just doing your best. I mean, like, cool, that's my best. Bye. Post it. Boom. Anyways, I sound like Gary Vee. Post it. Boom. Post it. Have a thought. Post it. Anyways, good questions. Let me hit one of these pre-submitted questions. What do we got? Let's do something a little more lighthearted. Jesus. Okay, never mind. Not lighthearted at all. Oh, yeah, here we go. What's the most embarrassing mistake that I've made in a show? There's a lot, but the show of horror that comes to mind for me was with Generation Axe. And for those of you who don't know, that's like Steve Vai's G3, but kind of G5. Generation Axe is Steve Vai, Zach Wilde, Yngwie Malmsteen, Nuno Bettencourt from the band Extreme, and Tosin Abazi from Animals as Leaders. They all play a set. I play drums for all of them. It's like a 4-hour show, and they play songs together, and they're overlapping. They do duos, and then all of them are on stage. And if you play guitar, that is very exciting and loud. And it's a fun show, and it's been really cool to be a part of that. But one show, speaking of everything else personal we were just talking about with your mindset, Dallas. They're filming in Dallas. We're filming the show. We're going to make a DVD. Don't worry. Just play it like you always do. The interesting thing about that tour is actually that I was never that nervous because it felt sort of anonymous. Like, it was filled with guitar players who were mostly over 40 who were there to see guitar. And there happened to be a drummer that was needed. Right? So there weren't like, my fans aren't coming to that show, aren't paying, whatever the ticket price is to come see me play with that show. So it felt kind of weirdly anonymous, actually, and that's comforting. But there's this one show. I was like, okay, we're gonna make a DVD, and I was like, cool. I'm not gonna think hard about it. I've trying to control my mindset all the time. I know that can be triggering for the anxiety. I was like, no, I'm not gonna be nervous. I'm just gonna show up and do my best. Was totally nervous, yeah, and butchered the whole show. And when you're having a bad show, it's not fun. And I don't often get in like a rut of badness. And usually that show's so long that after 45 minutes, I'm like out of badness. Like my anxiety just runs out, anxiety tank on empty. And I'm like, I guess I don't care anymore. And I just do the last 3 hours of the show pretty happily. This one I managed to mess up consistently in every guitarist set for 4 hours. And like big, bad things all the time. So that was a nightmare. And we finished, and I was like, I think I might have made that like unusable as a DVD. I don't know if it ever got made. I hope it wasn't because of me. I don't think it was. But I didn't see it if it came out. So that was bad. That was bad. Everyone was nice enough, but everyone was like, noticed the mistakes. So that was nice. And then on that same tour, I remember one show, we play these Animals as Leaders songs. We open with Tempting Time, right? So cool. Coming out cold, first show of the night. Just had 4 shows in a row. The hardest song I've ever played, still, Tempting Time. Boom. A lot of counting, a lot of weird rhythms, and a lot of odd time signatures and interesting section changes. And boom, I'm dropping out I drop out a whole section. Drop out for that cool guitar lick that's supposed to happen 2 minutes in, and I'm like a whole section early, and Tosin's like, nice. And he's just still playing the song. The bass player's still playing the song. And then that section hits. It was the most obvious mistake ever. And he was like, this is the part. It was one of those, like, everyone in the audience knew that the guitar player was helping me. So that was fun. But anyways, okay, another interesting question here. This was submitted on Instagram. What does it take to be a mature musician? Nice and abstract question. You are teeing me up for an overly complex answer. But no, we're going to keep it simple. What does it take to be a mature musician? Short answer, experience. What does that mean? Experience with what? Practicing in the practice room, playing shows, I don't know. The kind of experience that sharpens your intuition. Okay, what is intuition? Intuition, and this is one of the most interesting things about being a musician or an artist at all, or a human being for that matter. It is a feeling of rightness that you can't necessarily explain, but that manifests in concrete things, like a decision on the drums, a groove, a balance of dynamics, right? Steve Jordan plays a groove. It sounds better than everyone else's groove. Why? Intuition. He has so much experience playing grooves in different settings with different people and listening deeply. And this is the other thing to think about, listening deeply. This all feeds the subconscious. It's down in there. So when you play a groove, your intuition makes decisions for you. And they are right. They are the right decisions because they're informed by all of this experience, which isn't, it's not like, it's not like a song you can remember you listened to when you were 14 years old. It's all baked in there together, and that all informs what you do. So the development of intuition is the reason that experience is what you need in order to become a mature musician. What else we got here? Okay, what does this translate to in the practical sense? In the practical sense, right, that was very abstract. What do I do? What do I actually do? I think the first thing you can do is listen hard. That's the first thing. So when you're listening to music, when you're listening to a drummer, you're listening really hard. You're listening to the details, the nuance, not the patterns, not, oh, I think you just played, a flam tap. You're listening to the dynamic balance between the accents and the ghost notes. You're listening to, as the fill progresses through a bar, what the flow of dynamics is. What is the shape of that fill? You're trying to listen to the placement of the notes. Is it on the beat, behind the beat? Something's ahead of the beat. Some things aren't lined up on purpose. What's going on? And the incredible thing is you don't have to necessarily be able to describe what you're hearing. Right? You don't have to go, he is half swinging 24% the eighth notes. You're not going to be able to do any sort of quantitative analysis like that. You're just going to listen, and you're going to listen really closely. And you're going to be like, it's a little late. It's a little late every time. He's doing it on purpose. And that's going to seep in a little bit. Doesn't mean you can go sit at the drums and do it yet. But as you listen to that more, then you play that song with a band, or you're looping that groove, or you play along to the track, and you're trying to, in the most nuanced way, copy him. Timing, ghost notes, all that stuff. It starts to seep in. It doesn't all happen at once. But over time, years later, hard listening, paying attention to these things, and you just start to think more deeply and more intentionally about the stuff. And it's really a matter of control, right? So, and this sort of informs like what you would practice. There's a performance, and when you're listening or when you're performing, and the things you want to do and the things you want to imitate, that kind of calls back to like, okay, when I'm back in the practice room, maybe I'm going to work on something relevant to that. But you're back in the practice room, you're working on this stuff, and then you're trying it out in real life, trying it on for size. It's not quite perfect. You record, you listen back to yourself, you keep listening hard to stuff. And that's all seeping into your subconscious, right? And this experience builds those decisions that you're going to make that if someone were to be like, why'd you do that? That you can't quite explain. And that's where the magic is. That's where the magic. That's when people, super cliche, but people are like, a dozen drummers play the same groove. How does it sound different for all of them? It's kind of that thing. It's subconscious. It's all baked in there deep. Okay. What else we got here? Singing back. Yeah, when you're listening. singing back what you're hearing, because like, again, that intuition, you're going to be able to sing it before you can play it. So if your hands are going to imitate this sound, you want to know it at the sort of cerebral level, right? You're going to go, boom, right? That was way more dynamic than I can probably actually play that on the drum set. But it sets the bar. And it's like, okay, I know what the music's supposed to sound like. It's half swung with my voice. Can't quite figure it out with the hands yet, but I know what it's supposed to sound like, right? I'm listening, I'm singing along with the stuff. So sing it back. And then the other thing is play with people as much as possible. And while you do it, be playing thoughtfully and intentionally. And this might seem a little counterproductive, or counterintuitive, because a lot of times people are saying, well, don't think, just play, just be creative, let it flow. Both of these things are true. But especially in the building process, in the early stages of drumming, if you don't feel like you can just flip the switch and let things flow naturally, reliably, then you do need to think, and it benefits you actually to think hard about things, to make decisions. But don't think hard about like the pattern you're playing. Think hard about the more nuanced things. Think hard about how you're playing what you're playing. Think hard about how you're lining up with this or that person, what part you're going to play to match who in the band. Listen really hard to the bass player and try to line up with him even deeper than you thought you could. Right? Whatever you do, don't play mindlessly if you don't feel like you're on that level where you can just let it flow. And this is like, again, sort of maybe it's a paradox, sort of a paradox, pseudo-paradox here, is that ultimately you do want to not think, right? There is an arrival point where you can just literally let it flow. Turn it on and let that intuition that you've fed through experience, let that make all of the decisions. And you're just along for the ride watching the show. You've automated everything. The decision-making process, the dynamic decisions, you've automated all of it. And you're there to just watch it appear and the muses take over. That doesn't usually happen, though. For most people, most of the time, they're anxious. They're nervous about the show. They have to take a drum solo. They're thinking about the song. What section is next? Flow is cool when it strikes you, but you can't necessarily choose when it's going to strike you. So you can set the stage for it, prepare for it, but don't count on it. That's why I'm always giving students real mental tools to improvise with that help them be creative, because chances are 90% of the time, you're not just going to be able to turn your brain off and flow and it reliably be great. So when you need to think about what you're doing, you want to have very actionable steps that help you do your best creatively and get out of your own way, help things stay focused. So you want to think hard about what you're doing. You want to think hard about the choices you're making. And that will, again, inform you when you go back to the practice room. What choices was I trying to making where I just couldn't do it? Right? Maybe my right hand, I wanted to play it quietly and it was just so loud all the time that everything sounded like crap. It's okay, for the next 2 weeks when I practice, my right hand's always going to be quiet and everything else is going to be loud. Something like that. Let's see, what else we got here? How we doing? Got some folks hanging in there for the long run. Is it possible not to compare yourself with other drummers? Only if you unfollow them all on social media, which I occasionally do. And then I have no issue not comparing myself to other people because I don't see them. Highly recommended. You can always refollow them. They'll be there. It is amazing taking a year off of following people. How when you come back, you're like, oh, everyone's just been at it. They didn't care I was gone. They definitely didn't miss me. Anyways, so what else we got here? Let's do one more. With some playing examples. Why not? Okay, so here's actually two really quick ones. How not to repeat yourself too much when soloing. Expand your rhythmic vocabulary. This is your ability to think of interesting melodies. This is the root of all creative drumming. And then once you can think of interesting melodies, boom, You can apply that to the kick drum under a groove, to the ghost notes under a groove, to the hi-hat over a groove, to a fill, to the double bass. You can do it anything. But if you can't think of the interesting rhythm, drumming won't be interesting anywhere. And you'll be stuck trying to take drastic measures just to get some creative variation in your playing. You'll be like, okay, I guess for the B section we need to like change the time signature and tempo because I can't seem to make it interesting in 4/4 at this tempo. But if you can make a bunch of interesting rhythms, including space, dynamics, everything that goes with that, then you're sitting pretty to get a lot out of it. You could try the rhythmic vocabulary course on my website if you wanted to really dive deep on that. Another question and another pitch to the website. Whoa, how to practice and flow with sextuplets. Those are 16th note triplets. Honestly, the triplet fills and chops course on jpbouvetmethod.com would really set you up super nice. It's not a bunch of patterns. It's not here you use the right, left, kick, left, right, right, kick, left, right. Be sure you remember that on the gig. It's methods that teach you to improvise in an ongoing way. 3 distinct methods that correspond with different tempos and triplet feels. And probably my personal favorite course that I have ever made because it's really, really effective. And it's an area that most people find really, really hard to figure out. And the course really breaks it down in a way that I'm very proud of. So last big question here. Yeah, this is a fun one. How to approach a drumless song, whether it's in common or in odd time signatures, whether you're improvising or writing the part beforehand. And what I want to do is think about the decisions to make, right? There isn't one process that's going to fit all genres, right? The session I did yesterday, right? Writing those parts, it was all improv based. There were no parts written. Radically different than the Childish Japes session where we went to Pennsylvania in a cabin and wrote 19 songs with Joanna Teeters, and we have an album coming out that starts coming out with singles in a few months. Radically different process, right? Those were just like we lay down some grooves, jam over them. Nice. Play the same groove the whole song. Done. This, wild jazz improv the whole time. So let's think about, instead of a technique that everyone watching can use, let's think about some questions that you want to ask yourself. And these will help you in the moment make creative decisions that give you variety, give you options with the musical context that you're in. And also, like I've said many times now, these questions should turn on light bulbs when you're back in the practice room about what you could be working on to expand your options. Remember, options beget creativity, right? It's really hard to be creative if you can only play one melody over and over and over again. So let's think about a couple considerations, questions you could ask. You're playing a drumless track, or a bandmate brought in a guitar part and they're like, let's do this, let's try this. Or you're just playing along to a song you like, or whatever, or you're writing a part. You can ask yourself the same questions regardless of the situation. Even me, thinking of parts in the moment yesterday at the session, I'm asking myself these questions. So question 1, how much are you going to match the other band members, right? Because if everyone is playing the same rhythm and you're also going to play the same rhythm, then that's refreshing. A lot is already sorted out for you. So if you're going to go ba 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 da ba 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 da ba 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 do ba ba da 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 da, then you need to think about orchestration and dynamics. But that's an extreme, right? Usually everyone isn't playing exactly the same rhythm together. So you might then, the next question is, who in the band am I matching? The bass player is playing something. The guitar player is playing a different thing. This is something I bumped into yesterday many times with the band. There was a bass part, there was a piano melody, and they were contrapuntal. They were different but complementary. And I could choose to hit those bass notes and like let the melody float over top of it. Or I could choose to play the melody and let the bass just hold down the bass. So that's your next question. Who am I going to match? Or am I going to match everyone? Or am I going to match both people, guitar and bass here, but with different parts of the drum set? So maybe the bass player is going boom bat boom boom ba boom da boom ba boom boom ba boom ba boom boom boom, and you decide I'm gonna match him perfectly. Boom 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 boom. The guitar player is going ba da ba 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 ba da ba. I don't really remember what the bass line was, but I'm playing essentially kind of hitting that guitar part, ta 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 ba with the hi-hat, and I'm playing the bass part with the kick and the snare. And now I've got the whole composite rhythm of the band sort of like reduced onto the drum set in different ways. And my high notes are playing with the high notes and my low notes are playing with the low notes. How fun. You could reverse those, of course. You can get creative with it. But it's a question you could ask. Who am I matching? And if I'm matching someone, how much, right? Because the next question is, do I need to play everything that they're playing? And a lot of times the answer is no. Right? So if the bass player is playing do 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 boom do 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 do, I don't need to play right? I could play bono ba da boom boom ga boom ga ba do ba do ba. That's I'm matching, but I'm not matching every single note. So then you're asking yourself, what are the important notes? What matters here? And you might find there's only one important note, or there's two. Maybe it's doom. Let's think of like a doom. Do do da doom boom ba da do 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 do. You can kind of hear like the bow boom da do do bow. What you do with those is up to you, because you're gonna ask yourself another question: am I keeping a backbeat or not, or is an alternate backbeat? The alternate backbeats course on jpbouvetmethod.com teaches you about those. So you've got doo-doo bop, boo-doo bop, ba-da-boom, bop, boo-doo bop, ba-da-boom, bop, doo-doo bop, ba-da-boom, or doo-doo tap, doo-doo, bop, doo-doo bop, doo-doo. Now I've got backbeat. Doo-doo bop, doo-doo, bop, doo-doo bop, doo-doo. Okay, so you're asking yourself, how much am I matching people now, if I'm matching them at all? And if so, who am I matching? And then your next question is, there's space. Let's say I'm matching someone, but what do I do with the space between the stuff where I match them? Let's say it's like a really kind of long pattern, and it's like boom, ta, dum, ba, big space, boom, ba, dum, 2, 3. Right? Tons of space. So are you going, what's the vibe of the song? What vibe are you trying to create? And if you feel like you don't have any options here, again, back to the practice room, how do I create different vibes? Let me think of the web of intent, which I reference in my Playing Better Drum Solos masterclass on YouTube, which is free. The web of intent. Okay, can I play this rhythm more spacey? What does that even mean? Can I play it with like train tracks filled in of every ghost note? Ba-da. What was it? Dum, ba, boom, ba, do-do-da, oh, boom, ba. Do-do, ba, boom, ba. Right? I'm playing every 16th note versus boom, ba, boom, ba. Boom, ba, boom, ba. Right? So one of the questions back in the practice room is, can I play this very sparsely and keep it interesting? This is going to push, in a lot of ways, your rhythmic vocabulary. If in that big measure-long space, you're only going to play 2 notes, got to make sure they're the right notes. You want to have some options, which is where you're thinking about the placement of your notes a little more carefully. Okay, so this is if you are going to match people, those are some things to consider. You can also decide, no, I'm not going to match anyone. I'm going to do my own thing. Totally legit. Your easiest, underhand pitch here, which is often the correct answer, I'm going to be a metronome, a groovy metronome. Yeah, and they're playing something totally different. Okay, I'm ignoring them. I'm a metronome of some sort. That can be a billion different grooves. Or you can say, you can create a bass layer. Okay, here's another one. So a bass layer underneath what they're doing that is essentially a metronome, but an interesting one. Like it's a loop, right, that is repetitive. And I think the key thing here is that with this option is that it just repeats. Right, so let's take the same funky thing, but now I'm getting a little artsy with it. I'm just going, playing kind of kick right left kick right left kick right left kick right left left right, you know, through the pattern. But it could be anything. It could be right, and I guess these all kind of sound like grooves. So I'm trying to make it not sound like a groove. It could be could be right. So you're creating a base layer that everything else is sort of dancing upon. Next, you could do something very different. You could play a melody that is a counterpoint to what they're playing. So they're going dum da dum ba da boom ba boom ba da. That's probably not a great example. Dum dum ba ba da boom boom ba ba da. That's what they're playing. So you go dum dum ba ba da boom boom da 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 da. Right, so you're in the spaces now, or like yesterday we played like a song that was like in free time, and so I was trying to think of myself as one of the melodic contributors, right, which makes me be very cautious about when I'm contributing those melodies and how much space I'm taking up. But if I'm going ba boom boom ba ba boom boom ba ba boom boom. Right, these are all, since we're improvising, melodies that no one else is going to be playing with me, but they are melodic statements that are going to end up being contrapuntal or complementary to something that someone else is doing. And then you can ask yourself, am I going to be doing something, if I'm doing something complementary or in the spaces, in the same register, in a different register, at the same dynamics, at a different dynamic? And those are questions that, again, sort of web of intent inspired questions that have a lot to depend on what it is you're trying to create. Right? Are you trying to create a moment of, you know, I don't know, tension? Or are you in charge of the release? And you'll find that, you know, you'll find certain things, there's no hard and fast rules here, tend to correlate with tension, and some tend to correlate with release, right? A bunch of unison notes you could think of as a release compared to a bunch of sort of like antagonistically contrapuntal interweaving lines. Or you could think of quickness and complexity of melody as tension building, whereas a simpler eighth note based melody is the release. You can also obviously be thinking of like high notes versus low notes, and it's all relative to how you use them, or a very jumpy melody with a huge range, doom ba doom boom ba doom, versus dun 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 ba dum ba dum ba ba. Right? Depending on how you treat those, one could create a lot of tension, one could serve as the release. So, yeah, we're learning lots of songs. Bro, help me with a chop roll. Bro. In fact, this goes for anyone. If you want to learn a chop roll, if you want to get your sextuplet fills going on, if you want to just generally learn to improvise on the kit like a monster, find your freedom, shoot me a DM on Instagram and just be like, hey, can I try your site out? And I'll give you a free month code. I'm not going to like promote it here because that's not really the point of this, but shoot me a DM. Dude, I got you. I want you to get better at the drums. and I want you to try my site, you know. But I'm really proud of it. But anyways, yeah, for the chop roll, shoot me a message, Mister whoever you were. And yeah, you know, guys, I think that's gonna do it for today. Hit a solid hour. Sorry about the audio, forgetting to use the mic in the beginning. A real professional move. I'm a pro. I'm going to go ahead and blame the Spectrum Internet guy for being here when we started. That was very distracting. But bless him. He got it up and running. And so my streams are going to be even clearer in the future. Anyways, gang, thanks for tuning in. Always love doing these. Thanks for the great questions. You have prodded me to think hard about some things that were really fun and interesting to think hard about just for my own sake. And it's always fun and a good sort of, again, radical acceptance, trying to be transparent and okay with it. That's always a good exercise for my own spiritual practice with thinking out loud in front of you guys. So thanks for being open-minded, hanging out with me today, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, see ya.